Panoflana to guide you through this webinar.
Thank you, Pavlina, and as well a good 25 for me as well to the whole community. And with this webinar on DCAT-AP, we would like to highlight and to give you some feedback first on what is the current status of DCAT-AP. So we're working on some smaller bugs and so on, and you can find them resolved already in our draft release. Some of them have been identified as bugs. They have already been addressed. Some issues were just generic questions for information, and they will be closed in the process. And then we identified a number of them where we would like your feedback upon, so that we can continue to resolve them, either in a quick fashion, say, okay, this is what the community wants, and we can resolve it quickly. Otherwise, we might have to think as community longer and work for a more extended solution. So these things, so if we do that and we can bring this to a new release, then we see 2 releases potentially this year. For those that we can immediately fix, like the identified bugs and some comments that you would give today, then we can address this in a bug fix release and say, okay, this is our first release. If certain things require more elaborations or are impacting our community larger, then this is of course for a later moment in the year, and that we plan at the end of the year. So this is our plan for this year. And of course, we like to interact with you on GitHub as much as possible, so that we can have these releases as well with as much as possible support.
There is a DCAT meeting now.
Okay, Juliette, close the mic. Yep.
Yeah, sorry. I thought it was closed.
No problem. Okay, good. The first thing that we want to address with you, and this is a bit of introduction and give you a little bit of workshop style, is the discussion on code lists. This topic has been actually already being presented and discussed during the last webinar of GeoDCAT-AP. But since that was in this sub-profile, if I'd say in sub-community, but it may have not been found its discussion already in the broader DCAT-AP community. We needed to bring it together to here as well, and we have to address, and this is important why we have to bring it at the end of this, the same slides, we will come with a concrete proposal for the code list qualifications in DCAT-AP, so that the whole community, we have as master our DCAT-AP, and then every sub-profile can align itself upon this use on these qualifications. So that's the reason why we take those slides. So for those who were present at that webinar, they might see it as a reminder. For those who were new, they can start in with the same backgrounds. So one of the topics what is in there, and that's why it's at least you will see that an example coming with this has to do with what to deal with code lists, for instance, like on dataset team, where we actually, if we look to the spec in DCAT-AP, have 2 contradicting or possibly contradicting formulations. If we look to the individual property usage nodes, then we see a formulation that you can use multiple teams code list. Whereas if we read the section on code lists, there they say you have to use the EU now. And so this looks like a contradiction, and we have to address this. This is a slide that will come back later on. And so this is in generalize. If we generalize this problem, then we have to establish a more cleaner and clearer interpretation of the qualifications, what we mean with mandatory, with must, recommended, may use of code lists. So this thing is that we want to give a better semantics for those qualifiers, and a clear semantics so that everyone can act accordingly in the expected way of working. These qualifications are not only impacting one single specification. That would be easy and then it would be nice, but it's mostly about what is the impact on sub-profiles or profiles that want to conform to DCAT-AP. So what is the relation? So how I have to do this? What is this relation? And how we write, or what are the validation rules that we propose, and in the context of DCAT-AP. So this thing, this discussion has impact on those elements for the community. To set an example, so you know there are code lists, and we expect from the DCAT-AP community that they are well defined, well managed, and that we usually expect them in published according to the SCOS vocabulary. So this is the quality level that we somehow expect to be there for code lists. But of course, that's not sufficient. So now we want to make use of them. And now I want to bring with you this question and the mental mind on it with these situations. So I have the sentence, and you can pick your choice and answers what you like. There is no wrong or good in here. But the sentence is, if you read a property about a property sentence, this property must use the range values from this particular code list, from this EU vocabularies data team. If you read that sentence, what do you expect in the different situations? Whether this is a correct situation or an incorrect situation. Yeah, so it's to check your own expectations. And in the first situation, example 1, you have a data set that has a team with a code list value coming from the dataset team, the agricultural team. So this is the first case. And you can think, is this good or is this wrong? Now I take and the situation 2, in example 2, the same property, DCAT team. I have another data set and I use the Inspire agricultural team. And you say, is this correct? Is this incorrect according to me? What is my expectation? We can have as well, of course, the situation where we have the two of them.
Sur le Wi-Fi du boulot et
Could you please mute your microphones?
Okay, so if you have the two, what do you think? Correct or wrong? Take it, write it down, keep it in your mind, it's fine for me. And now you do the same thing for the 3 different situations, and you take it from the sentence, this property may use as range values, the codes from this data team. This is correct in the first case, it is incorrect in the second case. What do you think? I cannot choose between them, they might be both correct. It's a bit of your expectation matching. This one here, now I have to keep it in mind. So I put up my first intuition when I read this. This is my intuition. This is a possible outcome. You might have another outcome. So in my first case, it's really true. The second case, it is true. And in the third case, I would say it's incorrect. You might have other choices. Same thing happens here for the may case. In my opinion, the first case is true. In the second and the third, I don't know. It's more like a warning, saying, okay, I must do something as actor on this data set. Maybe I want to drive way more towards harmonization. And then I say it's false. If I say I want to leave it, I don't want to drive on it, I accept it. So it's a bit of my attitude to how much quality or how much harmonization I am intending on this property. Okay. Now you are set in this mindset that you can play with it and have some choices. I want to highlight the impact on validation. So if we look to our current shapes, then we see that if we write about a property, then we ensure that for this property, in this case, an example is DCT subject. Sorry, that should be better, DCT DCAT team. Then we violate that if this property has a value outside of the code list. In the case of mandatory or must, we write this kind of things. So if we disagree or we change the qualification, this may change from a representation and have to adapt to it. That's single within the profile. Now we have to think over situations as well when we deal with publishers that want to provide their data set, their metadata to multiple portals. So you expect as a user that if you have your own catalog and you let it harvest by your national portal and you let it harvest by the European portal directly, you let do that, then you would expect both somehow to be coherent in their validation process. So what happens if we have harvesting your same catalog by different portals, and then these portals have different validation or profile expectations? If they would interpret these qualifications correct or differently or aligned or not coherent with each other. And again, this is a situation, so think of it. So the case may happen that a publisher publishes successfully on system 1 and it wants to get to be published on system 2. So what happens? So if we have DCAT team in my data set, in my own original data catalog to be the agricultural now, and I say as a portal A, I have been harvested by that and it is correctly expected as team, so say hey, top. It might be that portal B says it must be an inspired team, and every time you add another value, so in the case 2, it's incorrect. So if you do this, in this case, the null namespace generally stands for named authority list, new vocabularies. So this in this case, if you say, okay, it's an inspire, maybe I disagree, and this gets you actually are not being harvested by portal B because you have this value of null agree. So this is the thing, what happens. Now you could say, okay, as a portal, as an owner of this data set, I changed my team. I put it to the inspire to it. And then you might, as that case, be happy for portal B, but not anymore happy for portal A. So this is this harvesting things, and you see that by your choice and by the specification and the interpretation of this specification in the validation process, you might enter in a situation that you cannot do good for either of them. And so this is the topic what we try to address to make it clear with our qualifications how to handle the code list use in the specifications, cross profiles, so that we users that try to be harvested by many portals get the desired, know what to do, the desired expectation. So this is the thing what we have to know, that is in general the code list specifically are not additive. If we look detail and if we take abstraction layer on it, then actually to a certain extent this comes down to 2 interpretations of the mandatory code list. That's where the pain is in the most, the pain is the hardest. And try to formulate the interpretations as good as possible. And so it is an interpretation 1, which says with mandatory code list, the value space is closed under the code list. That means that in that case, if you have another value associated with that property, and it's not part of that code list, so it's not listed as one of the possible values, it's incorrect. So the closure is in this list of possible values. The interpretation 2 formulates it differently and says there must be at least one value from this, the identified code list. And that means that there at least this possibility of openness to other code lists, but at least you know that there will be one value of that particular code list. The two interpretations are different and have different effects on validation and rules with regards to subprofiles or connected harvesting profiles. And the first thing is that the first interpretation, you can see that the value space, the closure of the value space, and the cardinality constraints of the property are independent. You can say in interpretation 1, you must use this code list, but you're not obliged to give a value. That is possible in interpretation 1. However, if you use interpretation 1, any subprofile or compatible or conformance other profile must ensure and keep and maintain this same code list restriction. So it can only be more fine-grained, and you can say, okay, in my profile, now the code list is being, I must use it, but in my profile, only these two values out of the code list are acceptable. That's a valid restriction. And you can restrict your situation more, or you must at least give two values for the constraint of out of the code list. That's a fine case that you have in interpretation 1. In interpretation 2, you see that with at least one value, the cardinality and the value space get connected. It means you cannot anymore have an optional property in this case. You always have to give a value for that property. The advantage is that, of course, other profiles may add other code lists, but you have to be in your validation, be relaxed enough that you know, okay, there may come values from other spaces, from other code lists that you don't know, and you don't know how good the quality is of that one. So this is the thing, what are the two interpretations that are present. Just final assessment on the two interpretations. You can see that the conformance of interpretation 1 is very close to what we apply to literal value spaces too. We say it has to be an integer. It has to be a value between 10 and 100 or something like this. This is very close to that. Interpretation 2 is of interest in other cases where there's somehow a need for aggregation. We want to see the overall possibilities and have this kind of flexibility. So it's a bit of openness, but still connected. I see a lot of chatting ongoing. I'll come back to that in a moment. So, to make the impact, interpretation 1, that's how the shackle shapes are today being written. We can write, and we have not done this yet, but we can write or adapt the shackle shapes to adapt this kind of thing to it. It might be creating a filtering process into it, but it's not always easy to it, but so this might have more impact than you think on the actual implementation. So the specification is easy, but in its implementation in the harvesting process, it might have more impact than you think. Okay, so this is the thing of that you see. Then if you have cross profiles, if you bring the profiles together, interpretation 1 on the closure of the code lists values is more strict than 2. But interpretation 2 still influences each other. So anyhow, whatever choice we make, coordination is required among profiles. So this is where we have to know whatever choice we make. So we discussed in the GeoDCAT-AP community these kind of 4 elements. So this is the introduction to you. So now everyone is up to speed, I hope. Back again, I think a lot of discussions, I didn't follow it. Also, Jakob can help me to guide on it. And before we dive in, I don't know, Jakob, are there any topics that we want to raise already now from it?
Yeah, there is a discussion on the 2 interpretations that you mentioned. Basically, many participants think that interpretation 1 actually is harmful to interoperability and violates the open world assumption because of the limitation of a certain property to just 1 code list. So that's the most liked comment. So really many participants think that. There is also a preference of interpretation 2 from many participants, and that is kind of the spirit of the chat at the moment.
Okay. Niels, I don't understand your statement that the scenario is more strict. So the code list, so first one, why it's more strict. What I mean with it is that you cannot have any other possible value into it. And it really restricts as well further on subprofiles to be using that code list. So it's really...
Yes, but at the same time, you're setting the cardinality to 0, so it doesn't have to be that, right?
But if you set the cardinality to 0, it just means you don't have to provide the value. But if you provide the value, it has to be from that code list. So that's the reason why I said...
But is it actually coded in that way in the Shekel file, since that's kind of hard to figure out, and it's hard to find the 301 draft, or actually I can't find the 301 draft Shekel files.
But the Shekel files of 3 or 0 are on this level, they are exactly the same, so there are no differences. So this is still this kind of restriction on the file in the Shekel shapes is actually interpretation A. You see at must. It's everywhere the same interpretation. We have not implemented at this point in time any code list according to the at least 1 value case. Okay. That's not implemented at this moment. But we know there's some ambiguity in the spec, and that we try to resolve and to make it clear to know to match everything together. That's the objective, of course. No.
There is also a comment from Ludger saying that since DCAT-AP is more and more used as a base for other application profiles rather than just for data.europa.eu, it makes more sense to be more open about the code lists, and that closing a property to a certain code list is risky.
That's always the thing, but at the same time, it makes implementations harder and harmonization harder. It means that even if you think I'm making a portal for health DCAT-AP, you must know that any other code list comes from outside. You have then to do filtering in your portals on every on these properties. Say, I only want to have the code list values where my portal can act upon. So this is the kind of thing that you have to be aware of it. This is what the spec then says. So the impact will be more to the implementation than to the spec. The spec is easy. It's in this case, the implementers might have to do more work. Whereas if you do the must, there's no ambiguity. Then it's the spec, and the implementers are very strict at the same time. So You have to see on that, huh? So what we did, okay, thanks for all the feedback. So we're going slowly to it. So what we did is that in the draft, we already put this 4 different cases into it. I see that I should be capitalizing at least into it as well into it to make it. And now we want to discuss with you this list that is below in it in the section on the controlled vocabularies. What is the inclined choice to make? So this is the list, and if we just roughly look at it, then this is the first proposal, and we'll go step by step through the proposal to discuss if there anything is immediately pops out from you as community that we have to adapt or to change. I do it by a group. I think on these properties, the green ones that I have identified here, the qualification is actually the case, like it should be. So I'll shortly walk them through. Media type, there's a must. There's another, it's even actually in DCAT. If you look to DCAT, then it says you have to use the IANA list. So it's even there. So if we would go around on this one, then it would be very strange. So you say you can use something else. Accrual periodicity, format, language have been a long time already being used and checked from the EU vocabularies. I don't see a need to all of a sudden allow others into it and to make it more complicated. Same holding for status on that one, which has an ADMS status. And then we have DCAT-AP availability, which has its own code list. So it's even in our own space. So I don't see a need to change to at least on that. I say I have another code list than the one we maintain because we have created the property ourselves. SPDX algorithm, that's a bit of special, but I would consider that at this moment a must because it refers to the list and the items that are in the SPDX RDF representation. So why choosing another over there than the one if you want to align with SPDX? We have another topic with SPDX later on, but I don't see the need to change it. And for access rights, the same thing. We have already a long time for trying to debate and to align on what are the possible values in the EU now. A lot of the discussion is happening over there. So I would propose to keep that as must and only to use those values. That's based on what is on the current practice. I moved explicitly publisher and spatial to may because there's a lot of possibilities over there. There's no one fixed list to being offered over there. So I don't see any reason to make it more strict than at this moment as may. So I would like to open the floor now on those green ones. If you see something standing out and popping on your side, say, okay, in my use, in my that I practical use and what I see from my data catalog, popping out that would immediately violate or need another qualification.
Sorry, could you perhaps just clarify, did you say that must now is connected to interpretation 1 and may to interpretation 2?
No, must is the closure of the code list, interpretation 1. At least 1 is interpretation 2 of the mandatory. At this moment, there's none of these green ones. I would move them to at least 1. That is my proposal. Keep them in the must. And there are 2 properties published as a spatial, if you look to them, to the code list table, then they have a very open kind of, please use these kind of code lists. No. So that's the reason why I put may. You may use one of these code lists as a soft recommendation. Is that clear, Matthias?
Yes, thank you.
No feedback yet on these ones. So we have created issue 406 where you can find these ones. We believe that this is along the current practice and would not violate any of the current practices.
We have two hands raised.
Okay, good. I don't know who.
Ludger was first.
Thank you. I'm not sure if it's a problem, but for RDMS status, we have the situation that we use it in different classes with different meanings. So saying so the code list cannot be for the property itself. It has to be in the for the property in the use case.
Yeah, that's the case. So yes, sorry, that's the case. So it's only where it is really mentioned in this for this code in this context. So
okay.
Yeah. So if there might be cases, and it's always indeed you're correct. It's in the context of, and you see it already for type. There I split it out: agent type and license. But for ADMS status, we have, I think, a code list one only on the distribution status. So that's the distribution status, this one, to clarify.
Yeah, right. And there the code list is also
in EU now.
Inline
yeah.
Changed, yeah. Okay.
Yes. And then Matthias, wasn't it?
Yeah, yes, thank you. I just want to formulate it a little bit differently and simplify it. For me, this means for all of the greens in the must column,
yeah,
they are now locked. All of these properties can never be used for any other purpose if you are basing your profile on DCAT-AP. That's my interpretation. And then I look at the properties and I say, will I ever be able to, would I ever want to use this? Because as a person who sometimes need to do an application profile based on DCAT-AP, what I do is that I look at what needs I have and I try to fit those needs into existing properties.
Yes.
And if I don't find anything, I have eventually to define my own property. That's the last resort, and I always want to avoid that.
Yes.
So the more properties that are locked from DCAT-AP, the less tools I have in my toolbox. And I look at them, would I even miss one of these properties? Would I have one situation where I think, oh, that one would be really good to have in some situation? And I find one of the properties that I would like to have. When I did the Swedish adaptation of the GeoDCAT, the Inspire, I used DC terms access rights for different purposes. The other ones I did not find the need for. I don't see that we need to have them for other purposes.
Okay, and so the access rights you need it for other purposes?
Yes, because there are specific keywords used in the Swedish profile of Inspire, an extension which kind of indicated something weird, and then I had to, or not weird, just specific, and I couldn't fit it anywhere else, and then I used access rights for this purpose.
Yeah. So this one here, there's the debate, of course, on the used code list, because we refer to a particular EU vocabulary code list. So the question is, was in your case, so considering on your case, the code list inadequate? That might be a case. Or indeed,
as I remember it, I had to do my own code lists to cover these specific cases.
Yeah.
Access rights for me is very generic property, useful whenever you need to limit the way you look at the resource.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was useful.
Yeah.
So I would prefer to have May for the access rights. The others, I think that is better that the code list is extended to cover for more needs. But that's my perspective, and I think I encourage everyone else to think of it from this list of properties to see, would I ever need to use these properties for any other purpose?
Yes. So this is a good, I think. So it's good. Thank you for the feedback, Matthias. I think this is in the right way, and to give you some feedback on it. So I try to give you as well the thoughts over it, so we can feedback. So at this moment, except of access rights, I'll put the colleagues put a star on it. On this one, we have a first initial good proposal. Okay.
Yeah, Ludger here again. Thank you for the talking about access right. Yeah, I'm working on a application profile where we would like to use access rights without a controlled vocabulary. So the vocabulary is pretty high level. We want to use in DCAT-AP. I think it's just open and public and restricted, so it would always possible to use it as well. But we are thinking about using it even without a controlled vocabulary. So we would be in favor to only recommend vocabulary there, because the access rights cannot be structured in a controlled vocabulary, because they can be very specific, and then we would need free-form text. But it's yeah. So we would probably be illegal or not conform to DCAT-AP in this point. And they are not green, but DC type, especially for agent type.
I will come to type. I come to that. So type is the next topic. If you have something on type, then it's the next one.
So yeah, for the other things, I have never was never in the situation that I need another code list for language or format. I think there the code lists are very good, but yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I saw another raised hand.
It's me again, perhaps. A comment to Ludger. I think Ludger made a very good point. I think we need to decide whether locking the property to a code list means that we lock it to the node type of a URI rather than both URI and literal. Maybe this consists of two dimensions of a property that you only lock it in the URI perspective to the code list, while you still keep it open for a literal. That could, I mean, that's a potential interpretation, at least.
Yeah, but that's a very hard one. That it depends on the property and the ranges and so on. If we have, then we have to look on that. If that is possible. I'm not so in favor too much to open that debate. But okay, let's see what it is. I understand for access right, but then more on access right, I would like hear comments on additional interpretation on access rights as well, beyond what is currently maybe intended in the property itself, in the use of DCAT-AP. So that's what I hear as well. So that maybe the code list might not be fitting for purpose, the current choice. It's not fit for purpose in all cases where the usage is intended. So I will have to lift maybe as well the discussion here and move it for the moment to least restrict usage of the code list, but as well have an open discussion on what is the use of access rights in the future.
Okay, and one last comment from Mohammed.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Bert. I have one question, please, concerning media type. Media type, which is controlled by the IANA code list values. My question, IANA code list values doesn't have RDF representation of the possible values. They have just an XML representation. And on the controlled vocabulary SHUQL constraint file, we have a comment say that cannot be expressed in SHUQL unless a copy in RDF for the IANA code list is being created. So I want just to know what is the best way to resolve this. If I should get the XML file and convert it to the RDF to put it on my constraint, or should I do it differently, please?
Okay, this is a touchy point, Mohamed. Here, it's kind of contradictory in the sense that indeed, if we look to IANA, then they have only published it as a flat list or with URIs or URLs to it. So if we would be closer to the current use and it is being, let's say, RDF structuring wise, then we should treat those URLs of the IANA media type as the URIs and just trust that they point to the right thing, etc. That they are good quality cost concepts, although they are not published as cost concepts. So this is the, let's say, the midway work around on it. That would fit. I see some data portals, if we question this on data.eu, we see some data portals using this approach, and I'm in favor of doing it. But it's not has been written out as such for this case. So it's good to raise this point in this moment because it would improve the use of DCAT media type as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's move the rest of this discussion to the GitHub issue.
Yeah.
And let's move on.
But it's good, Mohamed, we take it up, we put it as well into it, and the colleagues and everyone on the table, what is the best way of using the IANA media types? So at this moment, we are keeping it open. Okay. Now, to help the other thing, so we have three gray groups, but I put the types as now as a second topic. There might be different issues, different choices on it, but the proposal is at this moment, if we would read it directly, it reads in the current qualification, the current table as a must, but in the particular use, and if we can say we can enforce it, the list that we have, the code list that we have at the moment on the usage, namely the agents and the licenses, maybe those code lists are not strong enough, not covering everything, cases enough, not centralizing and harmonizing enough on it. So therefore, the proposal is to move them to recommended. So they still have this original flavor of must, but actually opening the opening to recommended. So this is giving more freedom to individual interpretation and see how those code lists can become more stronger and can grow in the strength to become the list of reference to be used. That's the proposal. Probably, Lutger, this is what you wanted to have as proposal.
Yes.
Eva has a raised hand.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much for this explanation. I had a general question about metadata queries. So how to restrict the use of queries to authorize person only and prevent bots, to make denial of service attacks based on queries. It's a general question.
Okay, so then maybe we'll take that later on because it has nothing to do, I think, related to this topic. Yeah, isn't it right, Eva?
Yeah, I thought about that when you talk about right of access.
The right of access. Okay.
The right of access, because everything derived from the right of access, and therefore I thought about this question.
Okay, so access rights is being used to provide the insight in what are the hurdles, the legal hurdles, and most importantly, to get access to this data. For instance, it may be military information, therefore you only get access if you have clearance from military. And so it's kind of this level. It's not detailed processing or whatever on it. It's more at this level that access rights has been or is being used. And in the simplest way, it is public, non-public, meaning public, you always can access. There should be limited technical and legal hurdles on it, whereas non-public means there are hurdles and you don't know how many. Does that answer your question? So a bit to where this property sits.
Yes, a bit. Thank you. So if they are accessible, it means that there is no restriction in the use of queries for this data, for accessing this data.
Indeed. Yeah.
So we cannot prevent a bot or network of bots, to request access, to make queries.
That kind of technicalities is outside of the scope of the specification.
I understand, but it's a very fundamental question if you want the availability of the network. I mean, if you, I mean, it's part of the risk assessment as well.
Yeah,
but I don't know at what point should it be raised. But I think it's an important question at one point to address as well.
Yeah, so I think with the colleagues from DataOper.eu might have some experience on how bots react to it, but most of the time we see that this metadata is being crawled and then maybe they have used it to do direct access or not. This is the challenge of the open and public metadata as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Eva, feel free to open an issue on this on the GitHub, and let's now focus on the issue at hand here.
Yes, thank you.
So this proposal for 08 is about moving the code list qualification for DC type, both for agent type and license type, to a level of recommended. Any objections to this? We didn't heard any. So I think it's clear. If any comments come, then we go to the issue. Then we come to the original driving issue, where we have this, as I showed in the original, in the motivation thing, that we actually in DCAT-AP have the two formulations for DCAT team in the spec, and we should be clearer about it. So if we look to the individual usage nodes at the level of the property, then the at least one formulation is used. If we go to the code list section, this at least one is not there, it's must, and you could interpret that as the very strict interpretation one. So this is the conflict we want to resolve. We want to get clear on it, and so we want to get your advice which one to pick and to put that in the right table. We have to note that sometimes portals try to use it and to do it, and some actually say we extend the EU null code list with a little bit extra information, and therefore we have an alternative code list that is very mappable into it. And this mappable aspect has been as well done historically with the Inspire teams. So there has been a mapping created to map the Inspire teams to the data EU vocabularies now. That would resolve, of course, the one single code list, because you could say through the mapping we have addressed it, but in general we have to resolve this for our specification, the two descriptions that we align on it. So therefore, your opinion on these three proposals, try to be creative. The first one is we do a must. We say we take the one in the section of the code lists up. And that means that, of course, yeah, you get a conflict if you want to use another team code list and say that's not entirely mappable or something like that. Then it's better to resolve it, and the best is to resolve it as a subproperty of DCT subject. Say, okay, you can create anyhow categorizations in the way. DCAT-AP is, by the way, as well a subproperty of DCT subject, so it's actually a generalization of that. And then we tightly connect pairing DCAT team in the context of Europe with the EU null dataset team vocabulary. That's proposition A. Proposition B is actually use the at least one formulation. And then the remark is, of course, every portal has to take care that there might be other code lists values coming into that team, and you have to accept that. And you have to be dealing with it and so on. So that's up to you then. But okay, that's fine. Yeah. Both solutions are minor changes in the specification. They have very few impact on the specification. It's more about the other profiles, how to use it, or the implementations that have to act upon it. And so the impact is not on the specification itself. We have a third proposition, which impact the specification really. And that means that we abandon in DCAT-AP as well the DCAT team property and leave it for the general aggregation at level of DCAT. Say, okay, we don't make any choice on that. And we say we create our own property team, which we tightly pair with that vocabulary. So this is the three options to it. So we would like to, and it's good, I think, that community. So write down what is your preference as you do on the chat. That would be good, so that we know what is, let's say, the initial choice upon it. If some people would speak up at the moment, then on this and would say, I really urge to use A, B, or C, then you can do it now. Otherwise, it's good to vote or to give your opinion on this one.
Okay, so far we have multiple votes for B and 2 for A. Okay, another one for A, another one for B.
And it will probably be very close. I wouldn't be surprised that this is gets a lot of ambiguity in this. We know that this is a very difficult issue as well to find consensus. But it's good to know what the community thinks over it. So this is really helping us.
Yeah, there is a comment from Priyanka that A is preferred, otherwise you cannot combine with other domains. Could you maybe elaborate on that?
Hello. Yeah, for me, it was more from a harvester point of view, that if you're also harvesting and you want to filter on certain domains, then if you have a control vocabulary, that's easy. Otherwise, you have to first figure out what all keywords would relate to health, for instance, or so. I'm not sure if it's a bit clear.
Could I respond to that? Because we had exactly that problem in the Swedish data portal. I think it's a real problem. Very, well spotted. What we've done is that we typically do some kind of faceting based on the themes, and we got the inspired themes there in there as well. So you could do them kind of front-end filtering and just hide all of the facets, for instance. if you have a small vocabulary like the data theme vocabulary, you can make sure that you search for all of the themes as a range value for that, or use some kind of star, like the base URL of that code list with a star at the end, because all of them have the same URI. That's all ways of searching out all of those that are specifically within this vocabulary. That's the approaches we have taken. Of course, it has a penalty in the performance on the back end. So we are considering to also in the harvesting process adding another property like position C that is hidden, that is just specific for performance reasons in the portal, that you actually filter on that, search for that, facet on that, and then show the other one in the front end. That's just practical experience, and I think that what you was asking about was practical experience for how to handle this situation.
Yeah. So this indeed, so this is the challenge, and it's good that Matthias shared this. As anyhow, in which choice we make, maybe A is then the cleanest for the implementers, and that would be very unambiguous on that. But in any case, you have to deal as an implementer to think over if there are multiple values, what to do, what is your choice to make, how to deal with it. And this is a good solution. So it can be that we say, okay, this is an advice then to give for implementers. And leave the spec more open and more towards sharing of data.
Okay, and one last comment from Sander.
Well, yes, my point is a bit that if we close this down to one controlled vocabulary, it will make adoption of other taxonomies that are, in fact, I mean, what Matthias was explaining, you use it for faceting in a portal, and the construct that, I mean, of pointing to the concept scheme on the catalog to indicate which controlled vocabularies you support in your catalog. I see it as a big flexibility in being able to express your domain vocabulary on how to do this faceting and drill down without having to be explicit in the well, it's a runtime dependency. Then you can extend the thing without writing new code. You can support multiple ways of doing faceting in a catalog, and fixing it to one thing seems, and then requiring something non-DCAT to actually, I mean, to me, it would be better to use the construct in DCAT as it is intended, and then if you want to create something specific, have a sub property, but that seems weird as well. So I would, that's why I'm more inclined towards proposition B.
Yeah, but both have impact. So there's no good or wrong here in this case. So there's
But the impact being in B that you have to filter things that you don't understand, or if you have to ignore data.
Yeah.
But it's a very, I mean, yes. I mean, and anyway, if you build an application, being a bit liberal into the data that you receive and being strict in what you output is anyhow how you deal with things. I mean that, but then yes, I mean I see how it can be convenient to really close things down, but I feel that this creates so much. I mean, it would only lead to more things like mobility, DCAT-AP, and all these specializations of specializations that then don't have any meaning in the broader sense of DCAT-AP, while applying this pattern of indicating which which kind of classification you support, and then having a generic way of conveying this without having to write code for all these individual things that cannot be understood broader.
But it means so actually that is this issue of multiple profiles doesn't go away. I want to make that this is not going to solve this. Choosing A or B is not going away because it is legislation or focus of the portal that you want to create, that you want to, the community you want to serve, that's driving that. The only thing is that we have to make sure that if we have a property and we associate a code list to it, that we know, everybody knows how to handle it. That's the only objective I have. So I'm not in favor of the other, but this is the thing what I want.
But it increases, by closing it down, it increases the necessity of creating specific things. What I mean is, in the end, DCAT-AP, DCAT is a specification for cataloging things, and having a way to be able to create additional facets in the end is already covers a substantial part of this discovery process, and being able to make the bin specific changes. Having all these things in, I mean, additional profiles of well, it seems like it will just, closing it down will make the problem bigger. It won't resolve it, but it certainly won't help.
I don't know, but that's I'm not sure. Well, let's see what comes out, and I see that there's a balance for both. It depends on which bit of what they're focusing on. I saw one comment I would like to share still from the community, and this is important. Even in proposition B, it's important that you publish and use your code lists according to linked data principles. It's really, if that's not the case, then B is a recipe for possible chaos. So that will be then literally as well the consequence to ensure everyone's support. So you have to support each other. That's the only comment I would like to raise, and that was mentioned. We expected it as being cost concepts. Yes, this is really helping you as a community. So you have to help each other. Okay, no other comments, Jacob?
Yeah, so to sum up, there is a split between Bs and As. Bs are slightly more favored than As. And so we'll leave this again to the issue. Please raise your comments there. And now we need to move on to the other topics of the webinar.
Yeah, and I see that the issue is 409. Sorry, this is the reference to the old, where the other discussion was. So on the initial one. Okay, good. Thank you for all the feedback. This was really helpful. Now I would go to a few issues, and these ones I have to rely with GeoDCAT-AP, so where the teams as well have to do with alignment, but this one are really coming from the GeoDCAT-AP community and the track we had last year, and they were showing incompatibilities or limits at DCAT-AP level, and it actually are a number of relaxations we would like to adopt in DCAT-AP. They are not applied yet in the draft, but with your consent, we would like to adopt them so that everything is aligned. I don't expect a lot of much of feedback on this, so if you have, raise your hand immediately, because otherwise we go quickly through them. The first relaxation is that if we look to legal information, there is licenses, but there are as well rights. And if in rights, we have in DCAT-AP historically limited it to one, with the idea there will be a rights document where you list up the number of the rights that you have. Actually, if we see in GeoDCAT-AP where a lot of the metadata actually is coming through the translation from ISO to DCAT-AP, that the rights are there, individual statements. They have split them in individual lines in descriptions. So meaning that there are multiple rights. So this is not one document that is being given, there are multiple. And so from that history, they said, okay, it's easy to lift, to have more cardinality, to have these smaller statements, and we propose to adopt this in DCAT-AP. So this is the motivation. We don't see any problem. It's not blocking anything on it. It will just show that we have a more fine-grained information on the rights, particularly coming from GeoDCAT-AP metadata. Well, if nobody comments, then this is fine. Thank you, Matthias, for the support. Okay. Then I go to the next. A similar discussion. It has to do with a clarification on the spatial resolution property. And if we, in the GeoDCAT-AP, one of the tasks that we wanted as well is to have a cleaner definition and usage nodes. And then you see that spatial resolution appears at different entities in our catalog, distributions, data services, and data sets. And what we see is that we had a limit in DCAT-AP at the level of data sets, that there only was one spatial resolution available. And the community pointed out that actually, if in the setting that the spatial resolution for a data set describes the resolutions that are in the original data, and the original data might be captured in different resolutions. So you might have a very fine-grained one and for the cities, and a very coarse one for outer lands or something like this. Then you might have the data sets with multiple spatial resolutions. So it's for that use case where you want to lift it and apply a little bit of this semantics to clarification that will be moved on as well, but that's just to be aligned. This cardinality is the conflict. So if no comments.
So I think of this similar to DCAT terms format. I wouldn't lift the max cardinality of 1 on the distribution, since every distribution is separate. Based on that, there is a different format.
Yeah, that stays.
A distribution is, for me, a way of getting to the original data, but the resolutions may be different between two distributions. That's one of the ways that I have assumed that is also allowed to vary between distributions. Now, allowing multiple distributions of one spatial resolutions within one distribution then goes against this. So for me, if you connect to download one file or connect to one API, then you have a single spatial resolution, unless potentially the distribution points to a data service via access service where you can negotiate to get to different spatial resolutions. Is that the case we're covering when we are referring to the data service? Or is it that there are actually, in a downloadable file, two different resolutions of the data?
So the cases, Matthias, here, for distributions, we stick to one. For the single file, we assume that the export is done in one single resolution. It's not a multiple resolution. That was so far confirmed by the community that is possible, and this is the usual practice. For services, the spatial resolution is the negotiation part, because you don't know that it's more a parameter. The capabilities, that's what you see it here. The capabilities of the service And for the data sets, we point to the original data. So that even how you capture it, how it was originally captured. So it's on the data set level. So you can have a data set that says, I do these two resolutions and I provide in my distribution only in that with some mathematical process that changes it.
Okay, thank you. I read it wrong. I understand now. It's on the dataset level. You want to change it. Fine,
Yeah.
Perfect. And distribution will be the same.
Level. The conflict is
Thank
only
you.
on the dataset level.
Sorry for misunderstanding. Yes, move on.
Okay, good. Everyone clear? So if no, we adopt this as well. Yeah, there are multiple distributions are allowed. Yes, no problem, Jordi, on that. The last one is as well, it has to do with...
Sorry, Berta, there's a question from Matthias. Could you make the point again how a data set can have multiple original resolutions?
So the point is that the community pointed out that if you create a data set, if you collect the data and you take the original information to start from, then you have a potential case that you actually are combining information from multiple resolutions. And to highlight that is the data set pointing to the original data in what you store and how you keep it as it is. So this kind of, as Jacob pointed out, a city you might be very fine-grained and very detailed, while in the suburbs or where the forests are, you are very coarse-grained. You don't see all the details, and the covering is very low level. So this is the kind of the case that in the data set creation happens, and to highlight that, this has impact on potentially the details that you get in the distributions to give that information. So it's a bit of provenance, site provenance information. Okay. Yeah, and Jan confirms this. Yeah. So this is exactly the case. So we want to support that. Then on this one, here we come to a technical representation of information, of location information. And if we look to the string representation, the serializations, we know that there are many different representations possible. WKT, GML, GeoJSON, probably just points list that you have in your local environment. So all these things have different serializations and actually denote the same location. And we have seen that currently, if we look to the cardinalities, we say the cardinality of a bounding box must be 1. And here we come on the discussion to the situation that actually you want to have that possible multiple representations for the same thing can happen, but that the bounding box denotes the same entity. Yeah, so this is a bit similar as multilingual text. So if you have a description, you say the description has actually multiple values. We have multiple values for in each language, unique per language. And this is a similar situation, unique per geo description. So this is the thing that we want to align. This is semantics that we want to endorse that this is the case.
Matthias asks if there is a possibility of agreeing on a single format here.
I don't know. Then we certainly have to choose between WKT and GML because GeoJSON drops out of it in that case because it only has one coordinate reference system. So we have to ensure then we have to pick either one of the two. I think that's, to my knowledge, the choice we have then. The geo community that's around the table may contradict me if I'm wrong, but this is my understanding.
Why I'm asking is because this is one of the few places where actually we are allowing something that, in my opinion, is rather stupid. Duplicate metadata.
Yeah, that's we don't have a direction here that we say we recommend WCAT or GML over it. It might be that if the geo community would say we prefer only this would already drive maybe to an harmonization that we check for that one. That could help. That could be a first step.
In my opinion, the GSP-VQT literal is better. It's more compact. It's not XML inside of a string literal unnecessarily. It's well defined.
Yeah, I have no opinion on. I know only for. I'm just back off.
That's why I'm here. I'm the opposition. I have a lot of opinions.
Yeah. Yeah. So we well.
Well, I had a feeling from the GeoDCAT-AP discussions that we held that there is no consensus in the geospatial community on WCAT or GML. They have different expressive powers. If I understand correctly, GML is still more powerful than WCAT. And since there is no agreement on which one, or on limiting yourself to just one, that's basically why this issue is coming up from GeoDCAT-AP already.
Well, wouldn't we then try to stop the rot and basically say, make up your mind, dear geo community, and we only will accept one format in the DCAT-AP because that's the general principle we have in DCAT-AP, to have one expression of metadata and not force everyone to do the conversions behind the scenes if necessary to duplicate it. Well, it's not necessary, but just make up your mind, basically.
Yeah.
Jordi, any thought of this?
Yes. So, in my opinion, I think that the important thing is that we are able to transform the information that is in the geospatial metadata, which could be in any of the not formats, but any of the ways of expressing, let's say, the scope, the geographical scope, which could be type of bounding box, or could be a polygon, for example. Since if the transformation tools available, which means the XSLT transformation, is able to transform this information into GeoDCAT in a correct way, let's say, but using only one type of encoding, for me, this is okay. But I don't know for the rest of the community.
Jordi, can we add this on the pilot or a little bit of the check to see?
Yeah, I think so.
As a topic.
Yeah.
From now on, say we cannot make immediately a decision here. Let's leave it at this moment thing. Let's put as a note or an issue that we work towards, let's say, a support for the catalogs to make this more cleaner for what it is, and as well to align with you, the GeoDCAT community, that the use of these metadata is good aligned or well aligned.
Yeah, but just to add that I think a bit like Matthias, in the final GeoDCAT document, I would say that the information should be only placed once in a selected format. But
yeah, but let's work towards so that we
okay.
see that the community here, so
yeah,
to go towards it, and then we make sure that, let's say, the mappings, the things are there, that everyone has trust in the decision towards choosing whatever choice might come out. And then we can enforce it at DCAT-AP level. Is that a good proposal, Matthias, as well?
Okay, there is one comment in the chat that the ISO TC211 are planning to make a mapping between GeoDCAT-AP and ISO 19115-1 in a not too distant future. I assume this refers to the other direction than what GeoDCAT-AP does at the moment. So it's just a note here.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
And yeah, both ways. Okay, so GeoDCAT-AP does it one way, and what is missing is the other way. Okay, thanks. And with this, we can move on to the next topic.
Okay, so the next issues we have 25 minutes, something like this. Then we will discuss a few issues that have been raised, where we flagged it as additional feedback in order from you, from the community, in order to go forward. And so we want to highlight and to give you an idea what we see as effects for these issues, so that we have a good discussion on GitHub, or at least can propose a follow-on proposal for resolution based on your current feedback on these things. So the first thing is that there is a request to type or to give more insight in the kind of data service that there is available. In the issue, they refer to this typing information. What we know is that already GeoDCAT-AP service type exists. And there is a code list maintained by the Inspire community. And this is very close to what it is. In the proposal, there was a hint to the data service type, which is a very high level. It has 4 code lists, for code list values. And you see that's very shallow compared to the data service. Maybe this is not the intention, the full coverage of the code list. So here, we would like to see if it's the right direction from the community, let's say, to lift the use of GeoDCAT-AP service type, which exists, and to extend and to align the Inspire code list with this list, so that everyone has one list to be using, and that we don't have what we discussed before on multiple code lists and try to fight on one, even if they're very overlapping. So we try to harmonize this. Any quick feedback? I don't know who was the author of it, but if it...
Yeah, I'm here. We raised this.
Yeah,
we raised it for last DCAT-AP DE, and we figured out that could be interesting also for DCAT-AP to differentiate. So I can only speak for that. This is a good idea, and that it is missing at the moment.
Yeah, but you would see that if we lift it and we align it with the code list of Inspire, as well as an additional benefit.
Yeah, I think so. And there was also the issue that there is an existing publications office code list, and what to do with it.
This one, yeah, to align all this. Okay.
May I just ask why we need a new property? What's wrong with DCT type?
In this case, it was to ensure that we were not, there were 4 types of properties, and they actually had in the same class in the service, and you don't know what you mean with it.
I think it's so a bit similar to the
theme. If you want to create a form, Matthias, and you say you use 3 times DCT type, and then you have to say, based on the value that you provide, you have to fill it in the form. That's essentially what the case.
Well, that's exactly what I did multiple times. And this is the same situation as we have with the DCAT theme, for instance. We have forms that allows you to select both from the data type. Yeah.
But it's very hard to make a decision in a sense of on it. So it's too.
Yeah, I'm not totally against it. I just saw that Bart Hansen also suggested that we used DCT type, and I also checked. We used DCT type for quite a long time for this purpose. So why do we need this specific this case?
We ensured that the code list was very specific, and that's very, we want to have it and enabled it to list it on it. This might be a discussion on then and back again and at least one, but then the type, you cannot use it for something else as a service type. So that means that you cannot put multiple definitions into it. It's very, I find it's very hard to give kind of definitions what you want to expect on it.
Well, we are using profiles and application profiles rather than, you know, property definitions, and then we have different descriptions of the same property in different settings. Maybe we don't do that so often, but when I did, for instance, GeoDCAT version in Sweden, I had multiple times, yes, use DCT type for this purpose with this vocabulary, and then again DCT type with this vocabulary. That's what we have to live with. That to always have distinct properties is a dream scenario. It's nice, perfect, easy. It's just not so messy, sure. But in the real world, we do reuse property for multiple different purposes many times.
Yeah. Okay, but here this is the case. We have lifted this. We have disambiguated at this moment, so this is available. So we can use for the exact same semantics. We have it. So it exists.
Well, it doesn't exist yet in DCAT-AP. It exists in GeoDCAT-AP. So the question is now, do we enrich the DCAT-AP with further properties? And the more properties we have, the bigger the specification becomes. And yeah.
But anyhow, it doesn't exist at the moment in DCAT-AP either. Right? So type doesn't exist. So you have to introduce it anyhow. So there's no difference. It's about the URI and the scoping of the code list that you then it's about extending it. It will be another property again. Okay, so this is this topic. This topic is another topic I want to highlight here in this case. The question is how you can find in the catalog what are the dataset series. There is no property in DCAT that gives you that answer directly. That doesn't exist. So like DCAT dataset nor DCAT service doesn't exist. DCAT dataset series, that doesn't exist. So what is the answer? What we can do? Either we wait for W3C to create such property, and we do nothing, we wait for it. Either we introduce our own property to make that possible, equivalent to DCAT dataset and DCAT service. We can do that. Either we abandon the use of even of DCAT dataset and DCAT service and say we use DCAT resource because that's the one that connects a catalog with the things that it is being cataloging. And you just infer what is the kind of elements that you have where you're pointing onto it.
Matthias says that he doesn't understand what is wrong with DCAT dataset property. Connecting dataset series in a catalog.
Because you don't know if you get a series or a dataset, Matthias.
Why do you need that? You have the type. Just make it more complicated.
Why you need DCAT dataset and DCAT service, then you go to.
Well, that could also be discussed.
Yeah.
Why do we need it? It's scoped. It's when you. I don't think that you need it to actually figure out whether you are having a dataset or a data service. It's a way of detecting resources in a catalog if you're not using named graphs. You don't need to distinguish at that level whether something is actually a service or a dataset, I would argue. If someone else is using the property for that purpose, please come forward and say so. But the property having a distinction between something that actually is a dataset is just a more specific kind of dataset, that the dataset series. And it inherits a lot of properties, most of them. I think this is, it doesn't make sense to have another one.
Yeah, and just pointing out that this moment is an incoherency into it, if you want to, this is the issue about it, and that at this moment, yeah, we don't know how to resolve it. We have no.
Why? Sorry, I'm being obnoxious. I know it, but why is this an inconsistency, or where does the problem appear?
In the sense of people are looking for a property like DCAT dataset and DCAT service, because there's a new entity, a new sub-entity in DCAT3 called dataset series. Why is that not directly pointed from the catalog?
Well, we do point to it in the implementations we have with DCAT dataset, and we are getting a dataset. It's just a more specific data. So it's a question of what you're expecting, I guess.
Yeah. So this is what I mean. This is, I think, I just quick.
There is another comment from Matthias Grunewald that DCAT resource property is not to be used explicitly. This probably comes from the DCAT specification, where it says that when available, when the subproperty is available, it is recommended to use the subproperty. So we cannot use resource for datasets and services since there are subproperties for that defined in DCAT.
Yeah, the question is why it is there. That's the thing that's introducing an abstraction layer that you are not going to use in the question. We can ask this to W3C as well, because at this moment there's an issue open, but if we wait, we can wait for it, but it will take, this issue, then we close this issue, and it will take us 2 years probably to get an answer. That's the expectation. It's fine for me, no problem, but everyone knows then when we wait for W3C as well, we can point it out.
But again, sorry, what if we just start using DCAT dataset for this purpose? Will anyone scream in pain? What's going to happen? And if someone, or just leave it out, what's the problem? Help me understand. Why do we need it now?
I want to resolve the issue. I want to have the answer to it. A sense of course, I don't know what.
Okay, I propose that we use DCAT dataset. That's the proposition. An alternative proposition from me.
Okay, but then you cannot know in advance that you get a series or a dataset. No.
Exactly, and I claim that no one is expecting this or need to know this.
Okay, and then in my opinion, it's equivalent to 3, almost. But okay, that's fine.
It's great to see that there are multiple points of view, because this is what we would like to capture then under the issue, because this is really a call for participation on the GitHub issue.
Yeah.
If we then can all voice our point of view, it will allow the rest of the community that is also not present during this meeting to vote and to indicate how they view, and then collaboratively we can hope to come to a concrete proposition which we can then address during the autumn 2025 webinar.
Okay, good. And then going to the next, this one is maybe we need more discussion with you as community. This is highlighted that DCAT-AP is using SPDX for its checksum to denote how many issues there are in what is the status of the quality of the distribution. So that's what it is. So you know this based on the checksum number whether it has been altered or not. Now there has been a new release from SPDX 3, and actually it violates, or it actually changes entirely the structure from SPDX 2. So what exists in 2 is not existing anymore in 3. The current URIs, if we look the versionless ones, they point to the 2.3 version, the latest 2 version. And the SPDX community has created an RDF variant with a version number with new URIs to semantic versioning level, and meaning 3.0.1 for the URIs in 3. Meaning that at this point in time, using the URIs of SPDX 3.0 means that every time they do a minor bug release, they would upgrade their URIs. At this moment, 2.3 is not made as well obsolete, the version of DCAT-AP. Now, if we do this and we want to do a line on it, now the impact is if we move, we apply a change from 2 to 3 to 3, then the users, DCAT-AP users that are using this checksum representation will impact it and have to adapt to it. But the benefit is very low, so you will not get anything additionally. You only align with the latest version of SPDX, and we very minorly use it. So here is the thing. Of course, this is the reason why I want to raise it as well here, is that it's kind of a generic problem, because we rely on an external vocabulary and it has a major change into it. And then what do we do? What is our base level of action that we want to do on this? So we have option A. I would like to know from you if we change from 2 to 3. Can we do that? Or we do option B. We say we stick to 2 to 3 because it has not been made obsolete. And we just note that SPDX has a new version. So in this one, we have to check and to know what to deal with it, because if we have other dependent vocabularies that we use and we act in this, we have such a same change and it has not been deprecated, what is the act that we do? How do we move the community or not move the community? So what is the kind of the principle as well we want to do this?
But has shared a different proposal. How about supporting both and give the user the possibility to use SPDX 2 or 3 to avoid regression?
This proposal is, you could do, but this, yeah, I don't know if this benefits for anyone. Because that means that everyone has to implement the properties both sides. So I don't know if portal users are going to use it, yeah, both at the same time.
If I may, Bert, please, sorry. Yes, the idea about this is not to use both at the same time, but more to use one or another, you see. One or another exclusively, and the user decide depending on their system. If they have a strong dependency to SPDX2 in their system, they can go for it. If they want to go for SPDX3, we recommend to go for the latest version. You see what I mean? And we give them the freedom to choose whatever it's okay for them.
But here you have to know the SPDX dependency is very limited. It means you point a value. It's about the value of the checksum. and the algorithm of the checks that you have been used. That's the only thing that you use a minute element of the specification. So with the dependency of this other one system on SPDX version X or Y is not existing. It's about how you represent the algorithms, which URIs to be used, and which values how you denote the value of the checksum. That's all of what we have in DCAT-AP. So as dependency, I want to point out, and it means who decides on it. If that any user is deciding, that means that every portal has to accept both values. There's no I see, for instance, DataOper.eu cannot then pick and have to implement both. If they want to show the checksum on the page, if you want to show it, you can ignore it, of course. But that's a choice then of the portal. So I think in the usage of it, we have here a very, big change of the external specification, but very little value on our side for what it is.
And last comment on this from Matthias.
I think this is a very tricky topic, and I think that the only good way forward is that there is some kind of principle that we from the DCAT-AP community agree on. That is, we only refer to external vocabularies if they follow a certain guideline, or maybe we call it evergreen or something. That basically means we don't change version numbers of our concepts. We only add new concepts or deprecate them. And that would be kind of a principle how you develop a vocabulary compared to another principle how you develop like a concept scheme. And if we don't have that kind of commitment from an external vocabulary or those that maintain it, we see that then in that case, we prefer to use a proxy vocabulary maintained by the publication office, which refers via same as or exact match to the both versions 2.3 and 3.0 of the SPDX. So that would for me, that would be kind of the optimal solution in this kind of situation. With that, you isolate yourself from this kind of version changing vocabularies that we probably don't really like in this very problematic world.
Yeah, so this is the thing where we are taken by surprise. So at this moment, the community of the SPDX has a versionless URIs, which point to the 2.3 and create an RDF of the 3, which is not connecting to the versionless version. So there's a challenge in that community as well, and they don't have done, let's say, a propagation of this versionless. So in the past, we would think this is a trusted ontology, a trusted thing. It has versionless URIs. We can go forward on it. We can do it. And actually now they violate because of the new community behind and team on it.
But maybe just make this more explicit so we can point to this in the future. And if we communicate with other communities and say that you are not following this approach that we rely on, and
that's the reason why
then whenever someone, I fully agree. So how to solve this exactly now, I don't know. Do we see that the 3.0 will from now on follow this principle? Then we could move to 3. If not, we need to isolate ourselves.
Okay, so if you have other comments, similar comments or opinions to it, force to please show. So what is your opinion? I understand from Mohammed that the 2 options could be offered, but I'm reluctant for that for implementers reasons. Okay. To continue on that, on new topic, there was a question for lifting the max cardinality for publisher for catalogs. At this moment, DCAT-AP allows only 1. there was an example given for the Pangea catalog in Germany. And the comment came that actually you can address this by introducing as well or using both groups. So in this case, if the community agrees that this is a good addressing, because into a large extent, this is actually what it happens. It's the group of the two organizations that jointly operate and manage the catalog, that this is a good approach, then we would add that as a usage note to the thing, and we don't change the cardinality. So this is our proposal to follow the community support guideline. Not other comments to it. Then we have a question on target audiences, to know data sets and to know what are the target audience to it. At this moment, DCAT-AP offers nothing for that. I wrote in this feedback the following proposition, actually, that it is very hard to know what is the target audience for data sets. And it's very vague and very subjective, meaning very portal dependent. So you have an objective for your portal, you want to bring it only for policy officers, and therefore you want to filter out and to target it for policy officers for health and policy officers for environment. And you want to use this targeting or doing this audience thing to it. It's very hard to find a good code list to it, and so this is very hard to share for somebody else. So I see at this moment very little value to share target audience information across the network in DCAT-AP. Now, so you can do it on your own. That's my proposal. There's no problem. But the proposal is not to include this in DCAT-AP because you don't know what you get, and you don't know what to do with it, and you probably will ignore the information. So you're sharing information where you probably have no value on. So this is the proposition, not to adopt this and to leave it in the hands of the implementers of the portals.
Sebastian raised his hand.
Yeah, thank you. We brought in this because in the more specific variants of DCAT-AP, this might be interesting. So here we came from the health sector, and there it's a difference whether you have data sets for scientists or for politicians. When we remember the COVID studies and data sets and so on. But I would have suggested that you say this should be fixed in a sector or a specific DCAT-AP variant and not in the central core.
Okay, that's fine.
But I think I oppose to saying this is not needed, because I think it's needed, but more on the specific variants.
Yeah, it's not needed at the level of DCAT-AP. It might be in the sector, in the portal. I really understand it over there. There's no problem, but I don't see that we should manage it at DCAT-AP level. It's very hard to say what to do with it. We cannot guide anything except of maybe saying this is the URI to be used potentially for this. But okay, this is very limited information. So if anyone contradicts this, say that it has to be shared.
Sander wants to make a comment.
Yes, I was just thinking that if there is this need to have this in a domain specific way, in fact this pattern that we were discussing in the teams for data teams is where you specify the concept scheme on the catalog, would make a nice pattern for this perhaps as well. I mean, it's a completely, but it's a way to indicate what kind of concepts you're using within your domain, and a way to discover it for upstream federating portals in a way that they can download the concept, the taxonomy, and turn it into a facet if they want to. But that's a completely different thing. It's just I just wanted to.
Yeah, I don't think we, and this is a comment, so we don't need to enlarge DCAT-AP just for for properties that we might have little use in the high end, in the big sharing. So I understand there's need to local or a sectoral level, and to understand on that, that's really needed probably, but the advice here is very limited.
Yeah, there is a comment from Matthias Grunewald that he agrees that this is not a good property to have in DCAT-AP, as there is a large risk of misinterpretation.
Yeah, so this is, I leave it to the sectoral way that it probably has a very fine-grained meaning, and it can be driven and can be motivated and can be held accountable for the good quality. Okay, we are almost at the last one. So this one is already an old issue. We just want to raise it before we close it. Now, because of because there are no comments where we have not receiving any comments on it. So we don't just change for the change. So there was a comment that the change type definition and the URI and the label were not matching. So this can happen. So this is not always the case, but this it may happen. And then there were requests, where the request was made to give a better definition, or to rely on the community for it, for that. And so far, no feedback has been common. Except just recently, Ina mentioned to change in the definition the word status to change type, but then we have a circular kind of definition, so we try to avoid that. So if not happens more to this, we keep DCAT-AP as is, and we'll close this issue. Okay, and then we are at the end. Thank you for all your feedback. Is there anything that you quickly want to say, or something you want to highlight that you want to share with the community? No, Jacob, you don't see anything?
No, nothing.
Okay. Then we wrap up. So, as we pointed out in the beginning, we have a number of issues that we are resolving. We have our draft release that is over there. We will try to look it up and point it and make it more visible, so that you already can have a look at it, so that we can get feedback from you on this. The small changes, the relaxations, we will put in the bug fix release. If any big changes we have here and there were some bigger topics where we saw that if the community was thinking towards the feedback towards that, then it will have, we have to have a better proposal and maybe have another discussion with you. That will be for later this year. So we will, before we do that release, having a webinar, of course, and we keep an eye on your feedback on the issues and try to solve these smaller issues as soon as possible. As already mentioned, so we have still an ongoing GeoDCAT-AP pilot. So in the discussion, you might have heard that dropping. That might give us feedback to improve GeoDCAT-AP if needed, and as well DCAT-AP if needed as well. So we keep that connection open. in order to have our bug fix release in Q2. So if there are any open issues and you want to have it that we touched upon and you want to give some additional feedback, please do it before April, then we have time to process them. And for the rest, it's a thank you very much for the live discussion and the interaction. I love this community.
I will also like to thank you, to challenge you and to welcome you to provide feedback through GitHub issues in order to make a progress on this. And on my side, I would like to say goodbye from the SEMIC, the role that I have in SEMIC to this community. It is my last webinar leading the SEMIC webinar, but I won't abandon DCAT-AP, and I will serve it in the near future with a different role. So I would like to thank the community very much for their commitment in providing a useful solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pavlina, for taking care all these years for DCAT-AP.
Great pleasure.
Yeah, and now support in the implementation.
And now support in the implementation. Correct. And I would also like to thank the team that is supporting for and make the support of DCAT-AP feasible, with especially special thanks to you both. All of those years in maintaining DCAT-AP for the SEMIC application. Thank you all.
Okay, and we are slowly closing down and giving everybody a good lunch.
Matthias here. Could someone from SEMIC stay briefly? I have a couple of questions about semantic assets.
Yes, sure.
Yes, we can stay.
Will you stop the recording?